Hey everyone, today in this new video we're going to talk about Deathsmiles, which is a pretty cool, good looking Halloween themed shmup from Cave. It's a horizontal game, which is unusual, and in many ways it is a very unique game. I would say it's very different from the usual style that you would expect to see from Cave. And it is still bullet hell, but overall the difficulty curve is very gentle until the final stage and final bosses. So you get to play around for at least 6 pretty decently easy stages, which I think makes it a very beginner friendly game. It gets recommended a lot as one of Cave's easiest games to clear, and I think that is the case, to be fair. I can share my experience though. I started playing this game about 9 months ago, before I got addicted to Crimson Clover, and back then I was a complete beginner at shmups. And I'll be honest, I couldn't clear it, even though it is easy, and I can say that now in retrospect. But I got it initially because it was, it looked nice, it had a nice atmosphere, but also because it was easy and approachable, and I could not clear it. And the reason why is because the final stage gets slightly challenging, not too hard, but for beginners can be a little hard. And another thing is there's no easy way to practice the final boss on the ports, at least, unless you play on emulation and use save states, which I didn't. So for me initially it was a little challenging, and I went back to it a few days ago, and it was a very easy clear for me. So I think I probably improved a little at shmups. I've got better fundamentals now. I know what the games are looking for, and that helped a lot. But I do want to say, for people who are looking to clear this, who just got started on shmups, if you can't do it, then that's fine, and it's easier comparatively compared to other games, other Cave shmups, but it's still, compared to most games out there in other genres, it's still a challenging game. So don't worry about it. And that nice thing about it is it's not very punishing. For instance, when you lose life, when you touch an enemy, you only lose half a life point, and when you touch a bullet, you lose a full life point. So really, to prioritize and avoid getting hit by bullets. And getting hit by enemies is not as important. You can't get hit by obstacles. For instance, here the sort of castle fortifications, they can't hurt you. It's just part of the level design. But that's nice, because in some shmups you can't touch them either, and in this case that makes things easier. It's a pretty easy and gentle game, not very punishing, which I think is nice. So another nice thing, and now we're on to the second stage of the game, is you get to choose the difficulty level of your stage. So on the arcade version, you get to choose between difficulty level 1, 2, and 3, 1 being the easiest and 3 being the most difficult. And they're still, not too challenging on level 3. But you get to see a pretty big difference, both on the stages and on the bosses. Bosses have more lives, more phases, more patterns. This is a level 1 boss, and as you'll see, it will go down very easily. But that's a nice thing, because you can sort of make the game as hard or as easy as you want it to be. So on the arcade version, you're only allowed to select 2 level 1 stages, 2 level 2 stages, and 2 level 3 stages. So you still get a sort of good mix of difficulty, and even counting that, it's still a pretty approachable game. But I thought that was a nice touch, that you get different versions of the stages that you can experiment with. So in my case, I started with the level 1s, which usually you would start with the most difficult stages if you're going for a 1cc, because in case you mess up, you can restart right away. But for me, I found that this was not the best approach. When I started with the level 3s, I would sort of get maybe too comfortable or a little bored with playing the easier stages later on, that I would start getting hit. So in this case, what I did was I started with level 1s, then moved on to the level 2s, and then did the level 3s. And that sort of helped me ramp up in difficulty, and I think it helped my focus as well. You know, I stayed focused towards the end because I was, you know, feeling a little sharper by the end of the games, whereas I think if you start with the harder ones, it's probably more efficient because you can restart, but then, you know, you have to sort of play easier stages later on, which to me doesn't really feel right. So now we're playing the third stage on level 2, and you can see it's still pretty easy. So obviously I know to kill the enemies before they can put too much stuff on screen, which is an important part of this game. You have to speed kill. And I'm using Rosa, which is by far the strongest character in the game. She has a really strong focus shot, and that means she gets to kill enemies really quickly. You can speed kill a lot. So this is a level 2 boss, and you can see that she has more life. Like, she'll last a little longer, but she's still pretty damn easy, to be fair. So the first 6 stages of the game are pretty easy, and I could beat them when I played the game a year ago without knowing anything about shmups. And then when you get to the final stage, it gets a little more dicey. So now I just beat the third stage. I've yet to get hit, so this is an okay run, although we've started with the easier stages, so, you know, of course we'll see what happens later on. In terms of gameplay options, so one interesting thing about this game is you can shoot, you've probably noticed already, but you can shoot right or left, and enemies come from all sides of the screen. And the nice thing is you get a prompt from the game that says an enemy is coming, so that's also, you know, that also makes it a bit more approachable, because it means you don't have to learn everything the entire game by heart. So I thought that was pretty nice. You know, overall, it is a good game for beginners. You know, if you get to practice the final boss a few times and know how to beat him, then the game will feel really easy. That's what I found out. I actually have a little trick for practicing the final boss, at least on this version. I'm playing the PS4, PlayStation 4 version of Deathsmiles 1, which was bundled with Deathsmiles 2, and you get a lot of other versions on there with slightly different variations of the game. But I'm playing the normal version, which means it's pretty much the arcade version with updated graphics, the graphics from the Xbox 360 version, and that version you get to choose whichever level you want for the stages, but I still stuck with the arcade rules because I think that's the way the game was meant to be played. So here I get a refill. It says life up, but it's actually not an extend. It's more like a life refill, because if you have 3, then you get nothing. So I got it, but it gave me nothing. And now we're moving on to a sort of mid-boss and important character in this game, Sakura. So the story is sort of nonsensical, so I didn't keep up with it too much. But this can be a bit challenging for this game. And I think I get hit a few times on this fight. I'm using I was talking about gameplay options. Right now I'm using the powered up shot. So whenever you get 100 items, so there's a counter at the bottom left of the screen. And right now you can't see it for some reason. That might be because I just used the power up and I'm against the boss. See, now it's back. So that counter, whenever it gets to 1000 items, you can enter a power up mode when you get a stronger shot, and you get to score a lot more as well. So using that shot can help make some sections of the game easier. So now we're moving to the level 3 stages, and you'll see they get a little more challenging. Not too hard, but it's interesting to see the difference. I think this might be the Port Town might be my favorite stage in the game. The music is really cool. I think it's the theme music for Deathsmiles. Or I love the music on this game. You know, I love the pixel art, the graphics, the atmosphere. It's a very unique game. I don't think there are too many Halloween themed shmups out there, and this one is really cool. And so I was talking about gameplay options. So you get to choose, you can shoot right, shoot left, you get an auto shot, you get a focus shot, and you get a lot of bombs as well, as usual in cave games. You get 3 per life. So that also makes the game very approachable. And see here, I'm on the 5th stage. I got hit once, so it's not a really good run. It's just an okay one. But if I don't get hit too much, then I'll get to refuel or get an extend. You can get hidden extends in the game, and you can also get 1 or 2, I can't remember exactly, with scoring. So again, pretty approachable. Sometimes you sort of have to know when the enemies will spawn, you know, to not get too overwhelmed. But it's not like hardcore memorization. It's still pretty easy. This boss again is also pretty simple. This is why I chose to play this on level 3, because I think the stage and boss are not too challenging. So on level 3 he gets 3 life bars, and his final pattern is a little more difficult, but still nothing too crazy. So this is an easy stage. And then after this one, there's only one selectable stage left. So here you can see the counter at the bottom left is stuck at 100. And that means I get to use the power-up shot. And you should, so when you get to the volcano stage, you should always save your powered shot, because you'll see I'll activate the powered up shot power up, I'll call it, pretty soon. And there's you can get an extend here. So look at my life bar, and look at what I'm doing. I'm still using the shot, and I'll talk about the scoring in a minute, because I think that's also an interesting part of the game that I didn't focus on too much. I really didn't do too much with it. So here, destroying the rocks, still have, you know, power up. And here I got the stand. And I'd need to look. I think it might be because of score only. But there's an extend, and there's a life up that you can get when you kill that second Cyclops that I just beat. So that takes me to, you know, 4 lives or 4 life bars, which was pretty nice and comfortable. I think I'll still get hit later on in this stage. But now this is, you know, turning a pretty okay run into a good one, for me at least. So the game gives you a lot of changes at recovery, which is nice. And now I'll talk about scoring for a bit. So I don't know the details. I didn't do too much research. I just played this for survival. But my understanding is you have to learn which enemies to kill with which shot type. So for instance, some enemies you want to kill with the focus shot, and some enemies you want to kill with the regular shot, and some enemies you want to kill with the, I can't remember, there's a lock-on shot that you can use as well, that I actually didn't use at all on my playthrough, because I think the only reason you'd use it is if you were to play for score. But basically you have to memorize which enemies are meant to be destroyed with which shot type, which to me, I can understand. I can see some people enjoying this. To me, that's not super enjoyable. I'm not a huge fan of memorizing in games in general. I know there's always a bit of memorizing that you have to do, but when it comes to scoring, I don't think that's a super interesting side of the game. So I don't think I would play this for score. But for survival, it's pretty nice. It's a chill game, a little long, but you know, sometimes you just want to relax and play something that's maybe mildly challenging, but won't push you too much. And so now I'm trying to kill this dragon boss of the Inferno stage on level 3. And as you can see, it gets a little more challenging, but I've still yet to get hit on this level. So I'm doing okay. And there are still a lot of, you know, places, save spots on screen that you could use. So see, I got hit this time, but for some reason this was considered as an item and not a bullet, which is, you know, pretty nice on the game's part. And I think that the boss is about to go down and yeah, cancel the bullets. So that's it for the first part of the game, where you get to choose you choose both the difficulty level and also the order in which you want to play the stages, which I think, you know, is a nice addition, and it makes the game feel pretty casual. And now we're moving on to the final stage. So there's an optional stage, then you can go through the canyon. That is supposed to be challenging, and I didn't do that. I went straight for the castle, which is where you get to fight the final boss. And here you learn in this fantastic story that Sakura, the witch's father, is actually a bad guy, and that you'll have to stop him from doing whatever it is that he wants to do. And we'll see him later on, and that boss fight is actually probably the most challenging in the game for some reason. I'll explain why later on. And so we start that stage, and I think for complete beginners, this is where things can get a little challenging. At least it was the case for me. I had to practice the stage quite a few times until I got it right, and until I was able to make it to the final boss. And now that I know it, it feels really easy to me, to be honest. But I feel like, you know, sometimes when we have those discussions online about shmup difficulty, we tend to forget that, you know, for regular people, all shmups, well, almost all shmups are difficult, because they're a demanding genre of game by default. And so, yeah, I've played this one quite a few times. It's a pretty cool stage, and again, with really nice music. I think this game has a lot of beautiful tunes. This is, you know, it's a longer stage. I think it's around 15 minutes, including bosses, so much longer than the other stages in the game, which are all just a few minutes long, 4 or 5 maybe, I can't remember. So this is, yeah, and it's split in 2 phases. A trick that I used, at least on the PS4 version of this game when I was practicing, because I wanted to practice the final boss, and unfortunately there's no way to choose to play against a specific boss. You can only choose a stage, which is a little annoying, because I would say most of the difficulty in this game comes from the actual boss fight. And I wanted to practice against the final boss because it's really the only remotely difficult fight in the game. But when I first started playing this last year, I was playing on the Steam version, and I don't know if that makes any difference. But because the final stage is 15 minutes long, it meant I had to go through the entire stage to face the final boss. And so whenever I lost, I would have to play again for 15 minutes until I could play that fight again, which felt really long. And, you know, as a beginner, that's pretty tough, because I wasn't even making it to the final boss every time in the first place. So what I did this time was when I practiced, I noticed that, so if you select the final stage, at least on the PS4 version, that should work on Switch as well. Maybe on Steam, I haven't tried it. But when you get to the second part of the stage, and we'll get there in a few minutes, so if you lose all your lives, then the game takes you back to the beginning of the stage, which is what you don't want. And if you beat the final boss, same thing. It takes you to the beginning of the first phase of the stage, so you have to play for 15 minutes. But one thing you can do and take advantage of, which is what I did, was when you get to the second phase of the stage with the sort of phantoms dancing around, and again, it's a really nice one, but it's just a few seconds away from the final boss. When you get there and you choose restart, for some reason the game will restart you from that second phase, second part of the stage, so you only have a few seconds to play until you play against the final boss. So it's actually more interesting to not finish the fight, and when you're about to finish, press restart, so you can sort of practice the fight right away, as opposed to actually clearing or losing all your lives. So I thought that was interesting. It helped me a lot because I had to play that fight a few times before I understood the patterns. It's not too hard, but you still have to know what you're up against. So, you know, it's just a neat little trick. I don't know if that was done on purpose, but it's actually pretty important. I wish more of those games had proper training modes where you can choose to practice against the boss. Some games have this, but I wish all of them did, because, you know, these games are hardcore. No one wants to play a game that doesn't have a training mode or doesn't have save states or anything, because the games are all about learning and repetition. So thankfully this game has a training mode. It's just not as intricate as I'd like. So this is the second phase, second part of the stage, as I was saying. It's much shorter and much closer to the final boss. So if you want to practice, you should definitely make the most of that trick. And now we're moving on to the final parts of the game, and still you can still see that the levels are not too hard, you know, still very gentle. In terms of design, I'm not a huge fan of some of the character designs, like the Loaded. I think that, you know, they were sort of catering to maybe the wrong sort of crowd, in my opinion. And as a father of 2 daughters, I find it a little concerning. But overall, it's not too bad, you know, like Rosa, for instance, is almost an adult, or at least close to it. And it's only in some of the endings, I didn't play all of them, but some of the endings are a little dubious, but otherwise, for the most part, they're fine. So this is Sakura's father, and basically the first phase of the final boss. And I will say, I think this boss is actually the most difficult part of the game. This is the part that you should practice. And the reason why is because when you kill this boss without using any bomb, the game gives you 2 lives, or it's either 2 lives or 2 refills. I can't remember, but that means it gives you a lot of bombs for the actual second phase or the final boss itself. So you really want to kill this boss without making use of any bomb, which means you have to learn the fight proper. So in my case, I came prepared with that, you know, power up with 1,000 items, so I just used that, and you can see his life is actually going down very quickly, which is helping me a lot. And I think I nailed this fight pretty quickly, and I was happy with how I did, because again, this is, if you can make it over this boss, then you're pretty much done. You know, the rest of the game, the final boss, is a breeze if you have a lot of bombs. So see here, I'm now on 4 lives. I'll get the refills during the cutscene. I think it's coming really soon. It's an interesting choice to give you an item during a cutscene, so you have to be careful with that. See, I just got it. And now I'm all set. I think I have 5 life bars, so something like 15 bombs to use. At this point, there's no way you can lose. I think, if I recall correctly, I think I completely messed up on this fight and ended up losing quite a few life points, but I shouldn't. I think I was too relaxed, you know, actually gaming with too many resources, which led to me you know, wondering, should I just bomb the boss? Because I think I could have just bombed it into oblivion, but I didn't know if I wanted to do that because that's not super fun, or, you know, still try to dodge the patterns, but then, you know, there's still a chance that you could lose a really good run. So I got confused, and I sort of think it's also nerves, where I was happy to do well on the first jitterbug fight, the one right before, and so I sort of, you know, didn't do too well. So now I'm doing okay, and the boss is down to half-life. This pattern, I think, is where it gets a little more challenging to me. The sort of boxes are a little annoying because they can shoot projectiles up and from all directions pretty much. And see, I get hit and instantly I get 3 bombs back. So really, if you play this smart, there's no way you can lose. But still, you know, I'm getting hit once here. I think I'll get hit another time. And this is where I sort of, you know, I was sort of panicking. Like, well, yeah, 3 times I got hit. So I started using those bombs to just get the clear in the end. But still, you know, even without using bombs, I think it's, for a final boss, it's pretty chill, you know, it's pretty easy. So I think this is probably the best cave game for beginners, as long as you can practice the final boss. It's definitely easier than something like Mushihime-sama, which gets recommended a lot. I think it might even be easier than Mushihime-sama Novice, even though I didn't feel that way at first last year, but now I definitely do. Now that I understand the game a bit more, it feels, yeah, it feels really easy. And now we're almost, you know, done with this final fight, and you can see they still leave a lot of holes for me to go through, a lot of safe spots. And see, now I think the fight is done. Yeah, and now this is already the end of the game. So again, a nice thing about this game is you can sort of make it as easy or as difficult as you want it to be by, you know, choosing the order of the stages, choosing the difficulty. Decided to go through the optional canyon stage or not. And then I think if you no miss, or if you choose several level 3 stages, I think it's, if you choose 5 of them, then the game gets a lot more difficult. And there are suicide bullets all around, making it a lot more challenging. But it is nice. I think, you know, it's good to have a game that can be enjoyed for by a lot of different types of players, because we know in this genre, like, shmups are super difficult and not approachable. I think even if you show a regular gamer, a regular player, if you show them a shmup, then they think they'll understand what's going on, but really they don't. And the tactics are a bit, you know, a bit difficult to really get the G stuff. So now this is the ending. In all the endings, you get to make a choice, which is pretty interesting. But, you know, even though the stories are pretty much nonsensical, it's still sort of fun that they pay attention to those world building addition. I think Cave are really good at making character designs and you know, world design that make people really interested in the games. Like, usually you want to know more. Well, in this case, I could do without the lowly stuff, but aside from that, it's an interesting world that I'd want to know more about. The thing is, there's nothing to really figure out. It's just a nice atmosphere, and that's one thing I love about the Cave games. Is they all have their own identity. They're all pretty different. This one is really different in terms of gameplay as well. And so this is why I would recommend Deathsmiles. Like, I don't think it's the best cave game, but it's worth playing and still, you know, still really unique and cool. So if you're like me, if you're a beginner looking to play a new cave game, I would recommend this, keeping in mind that it might not be as easy as people say, right away. You still sort of need to understand what's going on. But it is much easier than most cave games. So, you know, it's one of the cooler looking ones and cooler sounding ones without being super hardcore, which is cool. So now we just, you know, I won't force you to sit through the staff roll. Thanks for listening to this run. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. I know I did. I do enjoy speaking over and sharing my thoughts over the games and the runs. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.